taking a look at our list of attack vectors and going to the privilege escalation section, you can see that in previous videos, we covered a lot of the more basic ways of escalating privileges on Linux or moving laterally on Linux. However, as I mentioned before, this is definitely not an exhaustive list, and there are many other ways that we can go about moving laterally or escalating in Linux. So you might be wondering, if there are so many ways to escalate or to move laterally, is there a way that we can automate the process of finding these kinds of vulnerabilities so that we don't have to perform each of those checks manually, but rather we can run some sort of script and it'll perform those checks for us? Well, this is in fact possible, and there are many scripts out there that do this. One of them is actually mentioned on the Linux privilege escalation checklist provided by Hacktricks. If we go there, it talks about using LinPEAS as a tool to hunt for Linux local privilege escalation vectors. Another tool, as an example, is Linenum. So LinPEAS is certainly not the only one. But if we take a look at LinPEAS, or the Linux privilege escalation awesome script, it says LinPEAS is a script that searches for possible paths to escalate privileges on Linux, Unix, or macOS hosts. When should you use a script, and when shouldn't you use a script? As a red teamer, I actually don't like relying on these scripts, and that's for a couple different reasons. The first reason is new vulnerabilities are being discovered every day, and those vulnerabilities are being posted about somewhere online or they're being reported. The script is only as good as its latest update. So if there's a new vulnerability that just came out but it hasn't been added to the script yet, the script won't be able to identify it. The script also will not look for more complicated attack paths. So, for example, it might look for, if from our initial user we can switch to root, it might look for that, but it might not take into account that maybe from our initial user access, we can actually switch to another user. Then maybe from there we can compromise another service, and then maybe from there we can switch to root. So while a script like this might help us find very basic paths to root, it's not going to be able to find some of those more complicated paths to root. The second reason that I, as a red teamer, don't like relying on scripts like these is because they run a ton of commands. And maybe one or two of those will actually report a way of escalating that works. And because they run a ton of commands, the first problem with that is it's really difficult a lot of the times to look through the output of these scripts and find something that's actually relevant. The second thing is, the more commands that you run, the more obvious it will be to a defender that something's going on. So whereas if you're doing escalation manually or lateral movement manually, you're only going to run enough commands to figure out what you need to know to perform that escalation or lateral movement. But with a script like LinPEAS, for example, it's going to run a ton of different commands, many of which you probably didn't need to run in order to figure out how to escalate, and a defender is more likely to catch those commands being run. However, I actually really like scripts like these as a defender, especially in a cyber defense competition. You're given a very limited amount of time with your environment. And in that limited amount of time, you're probably going to want to identify as many of those ways of getting to root as possible so that you can get rid of them before the attackers abuse them, right? And so scripts like these are fantastic because they'll give you a lot of detailed output that you can browse through, learn more about what your machine is doing, and really quickly identify some potential ways, and maybe a variety of different ways, that attackers can either move laterally or escalate privileges on your machine. As an example, I'm just going to run LinPEAS on our target. So if I go down to the quick start section, it looks like I should be able to just run this, and that'll run LinPEAS for us. And if you look at what this does, it uses curl to pull the script directly from this GitHub site, and then it passes it into SH. So, or in other words, it basically runs it. Again, I want to caution you, this is a script that is coming from online, and so it would probably be good to take a look at that script and see what it's actually doing before you run it on your machine. But this has already been tried and tested. I've used this many times. I feel comfortable using this script. So I'm just going to run it as is. If I grab this, and I'm going to go back to my Kali machine where I'm already SSH'd into the target, and I try to run it. You'll notice we have a little problem here because actually my target doesn't have curl on it. So to get around this, we can actually run this a little different way. We can use wget and actually download that linpeas.sh script. I'm going to make it executable with chmod +x linpeas.sh, and then I'm going to go ahead and run it. And this will run a lot of the checks that we previously ran manually. The nice thing that you'll notice about LinPEAS specifically too is that it color codes the output. So if the output is highlighted in yellow, it is very likely a way that we can gain root. Red means that it could potentially be a way that we can gain root and that we should take another look at it. Looking at this output, there's a lot of stuff to look through. And like I talked about earlier, that's one of the downsides of using scripts like these, that you just have a ton of output to scroll through, hoping to find something, trying to understand what everything does. But hopefully you'll find something that maybe catches your eye, maybe it's highlighted in yellow like that, and then that'll give you an idea of how you could potentially escalate privileges. It will do all the same checks that I showed how to do manually before, including look at capabilities for potentially unusual ones, including look at files with that set UID bit set and see if any of them are owned by root and if any of them can be abused to gain root, in addition to many other checks. So as an attacker, if I can't find a way to escalate, these tools are a very good last resort that I might go to. And as a defender, if you want to take a quick overview of what's going on your system and try to find potential ways that attackers can escalate so you can get rid of them, this is a fantastic script to run. In the next video, we're going to be talking about setting up an active defense system so you can actually see what attackers are doing once they get on your machine. You can kick them out and you can undo the things that they did.